Aberration was always one of my most favourite maps. With its lush caverns and dark depths, it provides one of the most unique experiences ARK has to offer. Aberration has some of the best map design in ARK. The three zones are very clearly defined. Moving deeper into the cave it becomes more and more difficult. This was lost in the later maps, where the difficulty was almost randomly decided across areas that look the exact same. Harder areas provide richer resources, providing incentive to go to those more difficult places. Rockwell is one of the easier bosses in ARK, only having to worry about stationary tentacles and the occasional Reaper and the Death Balls. Whilst it is one of the easier bosses, it is not too easy, still providing enough challenge requiring a good rock drake and a good shotgun. The tech rewards are good, with the tech railgun being useful with its thermal vision, and the sleeping pod allowing for better offline XP gain. Aberration completely removes flyers from the map, they cannot even be uncryopoded. This is one of the best parts for Aberration, changing the experience to what I consider a more fun game. I don't find pick PvP to be very fun, and the lack of flyers makes positioning even more important. It provides a more difficult experience having to travel on the ground. As Aberration is a cave map, the ratholes feel more natural and they are more disguised. This makes Aberration good for lower count tribes who need to stay hidden and be more defendable. The Reaper is my, and many others, favourite tames in the game. They just look amazing. The taming is a bit too easy and can be manipulated, but other than that is one of the best creatures in ARK. The Rex, Giga and Karka do not spawn on Aberration and they cannot be used there. This makes the Spino more utilised, and using creature bans for certain maps can allow for a change in meta. If you are enjoying the video, please consider subscribing. The Yearling is very similar in looks and design to the Rock Drake, but it seems the Yearling is easier to tame and also has combat abilities. This makes the Rock Drake a lot more redundant, being larger and not being able to fight as well. To balance the Yearling, making its glide ability a lot worse in comparison to the Drake would allow for people to rely on the Drake for movement, but still allow the Yearling to be worthwhile. Bob's Tales shows that an airship will be introduced to Aberration. They do seem to be able to only hold one person, but it does feel like they could be abused depending on how they work. The trains of Scorched Earth were well balanced and not overly applicable to PvP, so if the airships have similar restrictions, there could be an addition that is not controversial, but we will have to wait and see. The Alpha Basilisk spawn that is required to beat Aberration at Alpha difficulty is incredibly rare. The challenge in beating Alphas to get the tributes should be in the fight, not in finding them. Giving the Alpha Basilisk a guaranteed spawn, maybe on the surface, would serve to make the fight a lot more engaging, rather than just searching around for hours on end and not finding anything. We can assume there will be a creature tied to Bob's Tales due to the introduction of the Oasis Soul, and I can only hope they do not repeat their mistakes. The new creature must fit Aberration's theme, and not allow for possibilities that other creatures or items do not, such as surviving on the surface. There should be some concerns about the performance due to the current lack of optimization. Aberration being set in a cave, with a large amount of objects required to render for the terrain and cavern walls, meaning that the performance on Evolved was one of the worst of all the maps. Combining this with the lighting of Aberration with the bioluminescence could mean that Aberration Ascended cannot be run for a large amount of people, but I will discuss this more in the Aberration Ascended chapter. In Evolved, Bloodstalkers and Managamas are able to be used on Aberration. This goes against the balancing shown through preventing Gigas and Karkas. I really hope they change this to make Aberration the hardest map, by not allowing quick movement unless you progress towards the endgame of Aberration. Oil spawns are quite difficult on Aberration, as nodes are only found on the surface or in the red zone. The location of these make it so obtaining oil is a little too difficult early on, and having it so a few nodes are added to either the edge of green zone or start of blue zone could make it so there are a few more places, not without a little challenge, to make it so one tribe cannot prevent the progression of another so easily. Aberration was a change in formula even compared with Scorched Earth. Whilst the desert did provide a change in flyer combat through the Wyvern, Aberration completely removes flyers, making ground traversal a requirement even into the late game. This is quite the shift in gameplay compared to most other maps. This worked for a lot of the players, with it being one of the most popular maps. Genesis did also not have flyers, though this was due to the addition of the Bloodstalker. I think Genesis has a lot to learn from the success of Aberration, which is something I want to discuss in a separate video. I believe that the massive change in scenery, the change in the meta through no flyers being allowed, the restriction on certain land dinosaurs, meaning that other dinosaurs finally got to be utilised, and the new creatures being added, that being the Reaper, Basilisk and Rock Drake, create an entirely unique environment where land traversal is required. In other maps, the Giga and Karka now dominate. They have no true competitor, where in Aberration, Spinosaurs, Megalosaurs and Reapers all can compete. These factors are what have led to Aberration's massive success. Moving forward, Aberration needs to prevent the use of Managamas and Bloodstalkers. These fundamentally change the nature of Aberration. and making it so the only fast creatures on Aberration are the Rock Drake and Yi Ling would help to keep the correct balancing of the map. As described in tweets by Jeremy, the Unreal Engine upgrade is due at the same time as Aberration. This is good, as it should hopefully ensure that the performance is stable on the map. He described a good level of performance increases, such as the 25% increase on base performance, the system requirements being lowered, which should allow for people to gain extra FPS at their current settings, or increase their settings at the cost of that performance increase. He also says that AMD's FSR 3.1 will be implemented, which will allow for AMD users and Nvidia who do not have 4000 series cards to use frame generation, which with the current performance boost plans should hopefully relieve a lot of players' performance issues. Ensuring that the Yi Ling is balanced and does not encroach on the Rock Drakes placed within the meta is vital. Having a more easily available, combat-capable glider would remove from the challenge of Aberration. The new creature that will arrive with Bob's tails must not be overpowered. It must not be able to fly, as that would completely ruin several features of Aberration, including PvP bases that are harder to raid due to lacking flyers. I really just hope it fits the theme and isn't vital to PvP or PvE for Aberration. Aberration is a fan favourite map. I really hope Wildcard does it justice.